November 1944, Camp Shanks, New York. The air inside the decontamination unit is thick with rising steam and the sharp, medicinal scent of disinfectant. A group of German nursing auxiliaries stands trembling on the cold tile, stripped of their grey Wehrmacht woolens. They have spent months in the freezing mud of the European theatre, scraping lice from their skin with sand, surviving on turnip water. They expect the brutality of a victor's justice, the harsh austerity they were told defined the enemy. Instead, a brass valve turns. Hot water cascades from the shower heads, not lukewarm, but steaming, endless heat. They are handed whole bars of soap that smell of lavender and tallow, a luxury that vanished from Germany years ago. The water washes away the grime of the front, but the sensation breaks them. One woman sinks to the slick floor, sobbing uncontrollably into her hands. Others follow, weeping under the spray. It is not relief that breaks them, but a devastating realization. If the Americans can waste this much fuel and water on their prisoners, the war was effectively lost long ago. To understand the tears on the shower room floor, one must first understand the abyss from which these prisoners emerged. By the winter of 1944, the Third Reich is not merely losing, it is starving. The propaganda reels in Berlin still show columns of fresh-faced infantry marching toward victory. But on the front lines, the reality is a gray, freezing rot. The German soldier, the Lanza, is living in a world of ersatz, substitutes. His coffee is roasted acorns and chicory. His bread is extended with sawdust. His uniform is made of recycled, shoddy wool that soaks up the rain and freezes stiff against his skin. The terrifying efficiency of the blitzkrieg has dissolved into a scavenger hunt for fuel and ammunition. In the Hürtgen forest and the Ardennes, units are often paralyzed, waiting for horse-drawn carts to bring up meager supplies because the trucks have no gasoline. The psychological landscape is just as bleak as the physical one. For years, Joseph Goebbels' propaganda machine has hammered a singular, terrifying narrative into the minds of the German people. Surrender is death. They are told that the Americans are lawless gangsters who will torture them, or worse, hand them over to the Soviets to be worked to death in the Siberian tundra. The women serving in auxiliary corps carry cyanide capsules, terrified of the descriptions in the party leaflets. When the collapse comes, it is chaotic and violent. A position is overrun. The artillery barrage lifts, leaving a ringing silence, followed immediately by the shouting of foreign voices and the clatter of M1 Garands. Hands go up. The fear is primal. They expect a bullet to the back of the head. They expect to be lined up against a wall. Instead, they are patted down. Weapons are tossed into a pile. They are herded into muddy holding pens, shivering, waiting for the end. But the end does not come. What arrives instead is the first shock of the American logistical juggernaut. It starts with the vehicles. The prisoners, used to seeing their own army rely on stolen farm horses and broken-down Opels, watch in stupor as endless convoys of American 2.5-ton trucks roar past, engines idling rich with gasoline. There is no conservation, no rationing of movement. Then comes the processing. In the temporary cages behind the lines in France and Belgium, the German prisoners are given their first American rations. It is a K-ration tin. They open it with trembling fingers. Inside, they find not sawdust bread, but meat, biscuits, sugar, and cigarettes. Real tobacco. The cognitive dissonance begins here. They have been fighting a war of annihilation, told that their enemy is weak, degenerate, and crumbling. Yet, This enemy has enough surplus food to feed the men they just captured. As they are loaded onto the trucks, the fear of execution begins to mutate into a bewildered curiosity. They are being moved west, away from the gunfire, toward the coast, toward the Atlantic. They do not know it yet, but they are about to leave the ruined continent of Europe entirely. They are about to be shipped to a land that, to them, exists only in the dark warnings of the Fuhrer and the wild fiction of cowboy movies. The journey across the Atlantic is a surreal limbo. The prisoners are marched up the gangplanks of Liberty ships, mass-produced vessels built faster than the Germans can sink them. Packed into the holds, the irony of their situation sets in. For years, they cheered the news of U-boat wolf packs strangling Allied supply lines. Now, trapped below the waterline, they pray fervently that their own navy does not find them. The crossing takes weeks. It is cramped, humid, and anxious. But even here, the logistics of the enemy are undeniable. The sheer number of ships in the convoy stretches to the horizon, a steel bridge connecting the new world to the old. There is no shortage of fuel. There is no shortage of steel. Then comes the arrival. For many, it is the harbors of New York, Boston, or Hampton Roads, Virginia. As the ships drift into the docks, the prisoners crowd the railings. They expect to see scars. They expect to see the damage inflicted by the miracle weapons promised by Berlin. They look for craters, ruined docks, and blackened facades. They find nothing but an intact, thriving civilization. The skylines stand tall and arrogant against the sky, untouched by a single bomb. The docks are hives of mechanical activity, cranes swinging crates of jeep parts and ammunition with rhythmic precision. The German cities they left behind are skeletons of rubble and ash. Here, the glass in the windows is unbroken. They are processed off the ships and led directly onto trains. These are not the cattle cars used to transport Jews and prisoners in the Reich. They are often older passenger coaches, Pullman cars with upholstered seats and heating. As the trains pull away from the coast and head inland, the true scale of the United States begins to reveal itself. The journey takes days. They roll through the industrial heartland of Pennsylvania and Ohio, past factories illuminated by floodlights, working 24 hours a day. They see parking lots filled with civilian automobiles, thousands of them. In Germany, private cars have long been commandeered or abandoned for lack of fuel. Here, factory workers drive to work. But the most shattering psychological blow comes when the sun goes down. For 5 years, Europe has lived in the dark. The blackout is the defining law of the night. A single lit cigarette could invite a bomber stream. As the POW trains cut through the American night, the prisoners flinch instinctively at the sight of streetlights. They see farmhouses with glowing windows. They see neon signs buzzing in small towns. There is no blackout. The realization is silent and devastating. The United States is not hiding. It is not afraid. The Luftwaffe, which Goebbels claimed was striking terror into the American heartland, has clearly never been here. The prisoners press their faces against the cold glass, watching the illuminated landscape roll by, realizing that while Germany fights for every square meter of ruin in the east, this continent-sized engine of war has barely broken a sweat. The trains slow down, eventually diverting onto side tracks in rural Texas, Oklahoma, or Mississippi. The brakes hiss. The journey is over. They have arrived at their new homes, the 700 camps scattered across the American interior, where the final dismantling of their worldview will take place, not with torture, but with dinner. The train doors slide open, and the prisoners are marched into the camps. They expect barbed wire and guard towers, and they find them. But inside the perimeter, the reality of the golden cage begins. The first assault is on the stomach. In the Wehrmacht, a heavy ration often meant a slice of mouldy bread and a cup of thin soup. Here, the prisoners are marched into mess halls that smell of grease and roasting meat. They line up with metal trays, bracing for the ladle of gruel. Instead, they are served portions that would be considered a wedding feast in Berlin. Huge scoops of mashed potatoes, gravy, vegetables that aren't rotting, and meat. Not horse or mystery filler, but beef, pork and chicken. On the side, there is white bread, soft, processed American Wonder Bread, and butter, real butter. The prisoners stare at their trays. Some are suspicious, convinced this is a trick, a last meal before execution. Others simply eat, shoveling the food into their mouths with a frantic intensity, their stomachs cramping from the sudden richness. The American camp commanders follow the Geneva Convention to the letter, which stipulates that prisoners must be fed the same quality rations as the captor's own troops. For the German soldier, this is a staggering revelation. The American private eats better than a German general. The abundance extends beyond food. Supplies that were precious commodities in Europe are treated here as trash. Cigarettes are distributed freely. Soap is available in endless supply. In the latrines there is toilet paper, soft paper, not the torn-up newspaper or leaves used on the Eastern Front. This material excess does more damage to Nazi morale than any bombardment. It strips away the heroism of their suffering. In the frozen trenches of Russia, starving for the fatherland felt like a noble sacrifice. Here, sitting in a heated barrack in Mississippi, picking roast beef from their teeth, the sacrifice feels pointless. They realized they weren't fighting against a degenerate enemy. They were fighting against an empire of production that could afford to pamper its prisoners while crushing its enemies. The camps themselves are masterpieces of standardization. In Germany, barracks are often drafty, lice-ridden shacks or repurposed barns. In the US, the POW camps are built from the same blueprints as US Army training bases. There is electricity in every building. The bunks have clean mattresses and wool blankets that smell of mothballs, not sweat. There are pot-bellied stoves with piles of coal or wood ready to burn. For the prisoners from the rural regions of Germany, the camp is more modern than their own homes. They have access to hot showers every day. They are issued denim work clothes with the letters PW stenciled on the back. The fabric is thick, durable cotton, better quality than the uniforms they surrendered in. The American guards are often baffled by the prisoners' reactions. They watch as German soldiers carefully fold the wrapping paper from a bar of chocolate, or stare in wonder at a functioning light switch. To the Americans, this is just standard issue. To the Germans, it is a display of unimaginable wealth. The message is clear. We have so much, we don't even need to hate you. While the Americans provide the comforts of the golden cage, a brutal internal war rages within the barracks. The camps are not monolithic blocks of defeated men. They are a microcosm of the collapsing Reich. The hardliners, die-hard SS officers and fanatical Hitler youth, raised on a diet of unyielding loyalty, fight a desperate rearguard action against reality. They view the abundance of American food and the leniency of the guards as poison designed to weaken the Germanic spirit. By night, the barracks become courtrooms. Kangaroo courts are convened by the camp elders. German soldiers suspected of being too friendly with the American guards, or those who dare to suggest the war is lost, are dragged from their bunks. They are beaten with socks filled with coal or bars of soap. Some are forced to commit suicide. Others are found hanging in the latrines the next morning, their deaths ruled as honorable exits by their comrades to cover the murder. The Americans are initially slow to realize the depth of this fanaticism. They assume a soldier is a soldier. But slowly, they begin to segregate the camps, moving the hardened Nazis to high-security facilities like Camp Alva in Oklahoma, leaving the regular Wehrmacht conscripts to drift away from the ideology that sent them there. With millions of American men overseas, the US faces a critical labour shortage. The solution is the prisoners. Under the Geneva Convention, POWs can be made to work if paid. So, the soldiers of the master race are sent into the fields of Texas, Kansas, and the Deep South. They are driven out to harvest cotton, corn, and peanuts. Here, the ideological indoctrination collides with the American pastoral reality. They work alongside African American field hands and white sharecroppers. The racial hierarchy taught in Berlin dissolves in the sweat of the harvest. But the true shock comes from the machines. German agriculture in the 1940s is still heavily reliant on human muscle and draft animals. A German farm might have one tractor for the whole village. In the American Midwest, the POWs watch in awe as combine harvesters and mechanical pickers sweep across endless fields. One German prisoner, writing home, describes the scene, noting that the farmer does not walk behind a horse, but sits on a throne of steel and gasoline, doing the work of 50 men before lunch. They see the farmers' wives driving trucks. They see the sheer, casual mechanisation of American life. It reinforces the sinking feeling in their guts. They are not fighting a nation. They are fighting the future. And they are losing. The interactions with civilians are equally disarming. In small towns near the camps, the locals often treat the prisoners not as monsters, but as curiosities, or even with pity. Farmers' wives sometimes leave pies or extra lemonade on the fence post for the working details. This casual kindness is more disorienting than a bayonet. It is impossible to maintain a hatred for an enemy who offers you a slice of apple pie while you harvest their corn. As the months drag on, the Nazi salute begins to disappear from the roll calls. The Heil Hitler becomes a mumble, then a silence. The cracks in the armour are widening. As the winter of 1944 bleeds into the spring of 1945, a strange and volatile atmosphere descends upon the camps. The physical war is thousands of miles away, but the psychological war is reaching its breaking point inside the wire. The catalyst is the arrival of fresh prisoners. For nearly 2 years, the camps have been dominated by men captured in North Africa in 1943, the Afrika Korps. These men are tanned, disciplined, and arrogant. They marched into captivity believing the retreat from Tunisia was a strategic withdrawal. In their minds, Rommel is still a god, the Wehrmacht is invincible, and the final victory is merely delayed. They have spent their time in America, eating well, playing soccer, and maintaining a fantasy of a victorious Reich. Then, the gates open for the survivors of the Battle of the Bulge and the collapse of the Western Front. These new men are different. They are not the bronze warriors of the desert. They are hollow-eyed boys of 16 and old men of 50. They shuffle off the transport trucks in rags, their eyes dead and vacant. The old prisoners rush to the fences to greet them, eager for news of the counteroffensive. They ask when the Führer will retake Paris. The new arrivals look at them with a mixture of pity and rage. They tell the truth. There is no counteroffensive. The cities are gone. The Russians are in Prussia. The Rhine has been crossed. This collision of realities sends shockwaves through the barracks. The Afrika Korps veterans accuse the new arrivals of being defeatists and traitors. Fistfights break out in the mess halls. But the evidence is becoming impossible to ignore. The American camp commanders, under the guidance of the Special Projects Division, begin a subtle offensive. They do not use loudspeakers or forced confessions. Instead, they weaponize the truth. They allow American newspapers like the New York Times and the Washington Post into the camp libraries. Initially, the hardline Nazis burn them, but curiosity is a powerful force. At night, By the light of the pot-bellied stoves, soldiers huddle over the English text, translating the headlines. They see maps of Europe with arrows pointing inexorably toward Berlin. They check the dates. They check the unit names. The reports are too detailed to be fiction. The letters from home, when they finally arrive through the Red Cross, confirm the horror. The writing is often censored, but the message is clear in what is not said. Families are displaced. Addresses no longer exist. The tone is one of desperate survival, not triumphalism. The golden cage has done its work. The prisoners are healthy, fed, and rested, which gives them the mental clarity to process their doom. The starvation and adrenaline of the front line numbed them. The comfort of America wakes them up. They realize they are sitting on the winning side of the ocean. By April 1945, the Nazi salute is rare. The camp cinemas, which used to play innocuous Hollywood comedies like Going My Way or Deanna Durbin musicals, begin to show newsreels. The Fox Movietone News. The prisoners watch the flickering black and white footage of American tanks rolling through the streets of Cologne, streets they recognize. They see the Cologne Cathedral standing amidst a sea of rubble. There is no cheering. There is only a heavy, suffocating silence. The realization settles in that there is no Germany to go back to. The empire of 1,000 years has been reduced to a heap of bricks. But the final, crushing blow is yet to come. The Americans are preparing one last film reel. It is not a Hollywood production. It is raw footage, shot by Signal Corps cameramen entering the camps of Buchenwald, Dachau, and Bergen-Belsen. The war in Europe ends not with a bang, but with a signature in a schoolhouse in Reims. But for the prisoners in America, the true end comes in the camp theatres. The order comes down from the Provost Marshal General. Every German prisoner of war in the United States must view the atrocity films. These are not propaganda dramatizations. They are raw, unedited reels shot by Allied cameramen liberating the concentration camps. The prisoners are marched into the mess halls or recreation centres. The mood is sullen. Many still believe this is one final American trick, a parting shot of Jewish Bolshevik lies. They sit with their arms crossed, defiant. The lights go down. The projector whirs to life. On the screen, the grainy black and white images begin to flicker. There is no dramatic music, only the flat, monotone narration of an American officer or silence. The camera pans across the wire fences, then it moves inside. They see the piles. Naked, skeletal bodies stacked like cordwood. They see the hollow faces of the survivors staring into the lens, eyes bulging from skulls that seem too large for their shrunken bodies. They see the bulldozers pushing mounds of human remains into open pits. In the darkness of the theatre, the defiance evaporates. The silence is absolute, broken only by the mechanical clicking of the reel. Then, the sounds of human distress begin. A retching cough, a stifled sob. Some men cover their eyes, unable to look. The guards, standing along the walls with billy clubs, bark at them to keep looking, that they will watch this. For the die-hard Nazis, this is the moment their universe collapses. They had convinced themselves that the concentration camps were orderly labor facilities necessary for the war effort, perhaps harsh, but civilized. The images on the screen are irrefutable proof of an industrial descent into hell. They are seeing the logical conclusion of the ideology they fought for. For the regular soldiers, the Lanzer, who fought for their comrades or their country, the feeling is a crushing, nauseating shame. They realize that while they were eating white bread and playing soccer in the American sunshine, this was happening in their name back home. The golden cage suddenly feels like an indictment. They are the well-fed soldiers of a regime that starved millions. When the lights snap back on, nobody speaks. They shuffle out of the hall, heads down, avoiding eye contact with the American guards, and more importantly, avoiding eye contact with each other. That night, the barracks are different. There are no political debates, there are no songs. In the latrines and behind the heating stoves, a quiet purge begins. Men take out their needles and scissors. They rip the Reichsadler, the eagle and swastika off their uniforms. They burn the patches in the stoves. They shred the photos of Hitler they had hidden in their footlockers. The tears that fall now are different from the tears in the shower room. Those were tears of shock at material wealth. These are tears of moral bankruptcy. They have survived the war, but they have lost their honor. They are alive, fed and safe, but they are terrified of what awaits them across the ocean. The golden cage is opening, the ships are returning, but they are not going home to the country they left. They are returning to a graveyard. The war is over, but the journey home is neither simple nor immediate. For months, the prisoners linger in the camps, caught in the bureaucratic gears of repatriation. The American harvest must still be finished. But eventually the orders come. The departure is a mirror image of their arrival, yet the reflection is distorted. They march back onto the ships, carrying canvas duffel bags filled with the spoils of their captivity. Cartons of cigarettes, nylon stockings for wives they haven't seen in years, bars of soap, and tins of coffee. They are dressed in new civilian suits issued by the US government or dyed army surplus. They look like tourists, not defeated soldiers. As the ships pull away from the docks of New York or Boston, the mood is not one of jubilation. They stand at the stern, watching the American skyline fade into the mist. They are leaving the only place where they have felt safe for a decade. They are leaving the land of electricity, ice cream, and unbombed cities. The Atlantic is grey and unforgiving. When the coast of Europe finally appears, it is not the green fields of home, but the shattered ports of Le Havre, Rotterdam, or Bremerhaven. The shock of the return is visceral. They step off the gangplanks into a world that has been pulverized. The cities they remember are now jagged moonscapes of brick and twisted rebar. The smell hits them first. The wet, rotting scent of unburied bodies, sulfur, and stagnant water. But the most painful confrontation is with their own people. The returning POWs are tanned, well-fed, and muscular. They have spent the last 2 years eating 3,000 calories a day and working in the sun. They walk with the energy of healthy men. They are met by a population of ghosts. The German civilians, women, children, and the elderly, are grey-skinned, hollow-cheeked, and dressed in rags. They scrounge in the gutters for cigarette butts. They look at the returning soldiers not with pride, but with a complex mixture of relief and resentment. One returning soldier, arriving in Frankfurt, recounts finding his family living in the cellar of their destroyed apartment block. He opens his duffel bag to reveal coffee and chocolate. His mother weeps, not just for his return, but at the sheer incomprehensibility of the luxury he brings. He feels a sudden, burning shame for his own health. He was fat while they starved. He was safe while they were buried alive. The golden cage has protected them, but it has also alienated them. They are strangers in their own land. They speak a different language now, sprinkled with American slang. They understand how the world works in a way their neighbors, isolated by years of propaganda and blockade, cannot comprehend. They walk through the rubble, realizing that the rebuilding will not take years, but generations. And they realize, with a heavy heart, that the destruction was total. The Germany they fought for is dead. The Germany they have returned to is a graveyard waiting to be cleared. the rubble does not remain rubble forever. As the initial shock of the return fades, a new reality takes hold. The 380,000 men who returned from the United States are different from those who returned from the Soviet gulags. The men from the East return broken, emaciated, and traumatized, often unfit for work for years. The men from America return strong. They have the physical stamina to clear the bricks, but, more importantly, they return with a new mental software. During their captivity, thousands took part in the Sunflower Projects, secret re-education programs run by the US government. They weren't brainwashed, they were simply exposed to democratic civics, free press, and American history. They returned to a Germany divided into zones, soon to be the front line of a new Cold War. The United States, realizing the Soviet threat, pivots rapidly. The Morgenthau Plan to deindustrialize Germany is scrapped. In its place comes the Marshall Plan. And who is best positioned to implement this massive influx of American capital and logistics? The men who spent 2 years driving American trucks, fixing American engines, and reading American newspapers. These former prisoners become the managers, the mayors, and the architects of the Wirtschaftswunder, the economic miracle. They rebuild West Germany not in the image of Prussia, but with a distinct transatlantic flavor. They understand the former enemy. They know that the American way is not just about chewing gum and jazz, but about a terrifyingly efficient economic engine that raises all boats. The relationship between the captor and the captive shifts permanently. In 1955, when the West German Army, the Bundeswehr, is formed, it is built by many of the same officers who sat in the camps of Mississippi and Kansas. But this time, they are allies. The animosity of 1944 has evaporated, replaced by a shared strategic destiny. The scars of the war remain. The Holocaust sits as a permanent, heavy shadow over the generation. But the personal hatred for the armies is gone, washed away by the memory of fair treatment. They remember that, when they were at their most vulnerable, the enemy did not line them up against a wall. The enemy fed them. History is often written as a tragedy of the vanquished. To lose a war is usually to lose everything: sovereignty, dignity, often life itself. But for the German prisoners of World War II, defeat was a paradox. It was their salvation. The Golden Cage was an anomaly in the history of warfare. It was a place where the soldiers of a totalitarian regime were killed with kindness. They arrived expecting the brutality they had inflicted on others, and instead, they found a mirror that showed them what civilization could look like when stripped of hate. The tears of the women on the shower room floor in 1944 were not just tears of relief. They were the first cracks in a worldview built on lies. They were the realization that the world outside the Reich was not a wasteland of enemies, but a place of unimaginable possibility. In the end, the United States did not just defeat these soldiers on the battlefield. It defeated them by proving, with every hot meal and every warm blanket, that there was a better way to live. The war ended for them not when the guns fell silent, but when the water turned on.